A good thumbnail can be the difference between a video that gets 100 views and one that gets 100,000 views. This is coming from someone who's designed over 1,000 thumbnails for some of your favorite creators, ranging from educational channels to documentaries, and get them billions of views. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to reveal all the thumbnail secrets that the top 1% of YouTubers are using to hijack the viewer's attention. And by the end of the video, you'll have everything you need to create a killer thumbnail that gets hundreds of thousands of views, even if you're a complete beginner who's never touched Photoshop. The first step in creating a killer thumbnail is ironically the one where most creators mess up. Imagine going on a first date with the girl of your dreams. You've been waiting for this moment your entire life. And finally, the gods have answered your prayers. You pull up in your best suit, you're ready to impress her, but 5 minutes into the date, you realize something's off. You haven't spoken a single word. She's been talking to you on and on about herself, her life, her Chanel bags, her Barbie dolls, and you're just there, trying to keep up. You try to engage, but all she seems is interested in herself. And just like that, in 5 minutes, the connection you were hoping for, it's gone. Your dream date has just turned into a nightmare. This is exactly how most beginner creators treat their thumbnails. They spend hours obsessing over the colors, the text, the tiny details, but they never consider what the audience actually wants to see. When a viewer opens YouTube, they don't have the time to appreciate all the minor details in the Picasso art piece you just created. They have about 4 seconds to make a decision. And in those 4 seconds, your thumbnail needs to do 2 things. 1. Grab the viewer's attention. 2. Clearly tell them what they'll get by clicking on the video. And if you fail to do that, they'll just scroll past your video and find something else to watch. That's why your thumbnail needs to be clear, compelling, and tailored to what the viewer actually wants. Sounds simple in theory, but the execution is a whole different story. So let's see how top creators do it. If you look at these thumbnails, you'll notice they all follow a common pattern. A clean background, a person, and some minimal text. At first glance, these thumbnails might look simple, but underneath the hood, they're tapping into a little-known psychological bias that instantly hooks the viewer. You see, according to studies, the average American only reads 2 to 3 books a year. And it's a known fact that most people don't like reading long paragraphs. So if you overload the thumbnail with chunks of text, viewers are just gonna scroll right past it. Patty Galloway, a famous YouTube strategist who's worked with the likes of Mr. Beast, suggests sticking to around 3 to 5 words on a thumbnail maximum, and that's exactly why these top creators do. But text is only one part of the thumbnail. There are other elements that need to work together to tell a cohesive story. A big mistake most beginner creators make is that they overcrowd their thumbnails with too many elements. They think the more the better, but as we discussed earlier, viewers only have 4 seconds to make sense of it all, and it takes them 1 second per element to process. Anything over 4 elements is overkill in your thumbnails. This is why you'll see top creators rarely use more than 4 elements in their thumbnails. For example, look at this Mr. Beast thumbnail. It has just 3 key elements. There's the background, an obstacle course, and then there's Jimmy himself, who looks like he's about to fall. With just these 3 elements, the thumbnail tells a clear story about what the viewer can expect. Similarly, in this Iraq thumbnail, there are just 3 elements. It's him, he's in a nuclear bunker, and then there's text that gives extra info that it's 500 feet deep. But these elements alone aren't enough to tell a complete story. In fact, there's another factor that ties everything together that most creators often neglect. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're in a library and you come across a book with this guy's face on the cover. Just look at him. You'd probably assume it's about business or fitness. I mean, this guy is jacked. So you pick up the book and you glance at the title, but it says $100 million dating secrets. As much as I love Hormozy, I'd be confused if I saw that because the title doesn't match the image at all. The same principle applies to YouTube. Take a look at this thumbnail, for example. At first glance, it doesn't make much sense. There's a suspicious looking guy and a note in someone's hand. But then when you read the title, everything starts to fall into place. Now you're intrigued. You want to find out what happens next. Does he succeed or does he get caught? And if he does get caught, what happens next? You want answers to all these questions, and that's what makes you click just like that. A simple thumbnail can hook your attention simply because the title matches the mystery in the thumbnail. Recently, I worked with a channel that makes dog content. In one of their videos, a new puppy was introduced to the other dogs. But the puppy came in super anxious and scared. Here's the thumbnail I made for them. And the original title they wanted was Golden Retriever meets Happy Puppy. She loved him, but that didn't match the story at all. So we switched it up. We replaced happy with anxious and loved with hated. Suddenly, it all makes sense. The title now aligns with the thumbnail, and it makes you want to click to see how the story unfolds. In the business space, this title thumbnail mismatch happens all the time. You'll see creators make videos on how to make $10,000 a month, but they'll use a thumbnail with a red downward graph, which typically signals loss. A viewer might see this thumbnail and think, wait, I want to make 10K, not lose it. Why is the graph going down? That disconnect confuses them. So they scroll right past the video and click on a video that clearly communicates what they'll be getting. But if you simply replace that red downward graph with a green upward graph, it instantly aligns with the idea of making money and makes it likely for the viewer to click on the video. So for your title and thumbnail to work effectively, they need to hit the viewer like a 1-2 punch. But everything we've discussed so far is of no use if your thumbnail doesn't check this next crucial point. You see, recently I was reading this book called The Purple Cow. The principle in this book is simple. The purple cow theory states that as a business, your product should be so remarkable that they stand out like a purple cow in a field of normal cows. In the context of YouTube, when viewers open the platform, they're flooded with hundreds of options. Your thumbnail needs to be the purple cow in a field of 100 ordinary cows to capture the viewer's attention. Because at the end of the day, it's all about attention. If your thumbnails don't grab attention, you won't get views. It's that simple. But you can't just throw in random elements and hope to stand out. The top 1% of creators use 5 proven psychological techniques to grab attention with their thumbnails. The first is to use human faces on these thumbnails, because as humans, we're naturally drawn to other humans, especially when there's emotion involved. And this is something that you'll mostly see reaction channels like these use. This AI game can hear me and it's hilarious. We have to lie. But even if you're not a reaction or entertainment channel, there is a similar concept you can use to double your views. It's called social hacking, and this is something smaller channels often use to gain attraction by featuring a famous creator from their niche in their thumbnail. Apart from this, you will see a lot of business and finance channels like these use large texts and money elements in their thumbnails because these are two things that naturally draw people's attention. Plus, it perfectly fits their niche. Now, the fifth way to grab attention is something that's quite simple, but also the most fumbled. Look at this color wheel. Now, the colors opposite to each other create high contrast and make the designs pop. Simple enough to understand, right? But when most creators try to implement it in practice, they end up making something that looks like a fair 5th grade art project. When done right though, this contrasting color effect is guaranteed to make your thumbnail stand out. Just like this Dan Mardell thumbnail. It's simple at first glance. There's this light background, there's Dan in the front, and there's this text element on a dark background that instantly grabs your attention. And the views on the video speak for themselves. But using colors in thumbnails isn't limited to just creating contrast. In fact, you can use colors to evoke specific emotions in your viewers. Many creators overcomplicate this. But here's a simple breakdown of the 4 main colors you need to focus on. Red indicates negativity or urgency. For example, a red downward graph in a thumbnail might suggest loss or warning. Green usually indicates positivity or gain. So a green upward graph in a thumbnail tells the viewer that this video is about success or financial gain. Yellow is often used as a warning. Blue gives a sense of calm, cool, and neutrality. This is why it's often used in tech tutorials or informational videos. So that's all there is to make a killer thumbnail, right? Back in 8th grade, I didn't care much about my studies. I still don't, by the way. And I would have as most of my assignments. I figured I could make up for it later, and it was fine. until it was not. By fourth and final semester, I realized I was failing history and I needed at least 70 out of 100 on the final to pass. So I stayed up all night, cramming everything about wars, treaties, and memorizing the entire history of the US presidents. And an hour before the exam, I was so confident I'd ace it. So I packed my bag and left for school. But when I got to the exam menu, I realized I'd mess up big time. It was the math exam, not history. Luckily, I'd already done well in math, so I ended up passing. But when it comes to YouTube, you might not get so lucky if your thumbnail doesn't match the context of your niche. A hyper-edited Mr. Beast thumbnail won't work in a niche like knitting, where viewers are used to calm, cozy vibes. Similarly, if you put those chill knitting thumbnails in front of the fast-paced TikTok crowd that watches Mr. Beast videos, they'd click away faster than Twitter tries to cancel Jimmy after well, you know, on YouTube, context is everything. You can have the most attractive thumbnail, but if it doesn't align with your niche, it will flop harder than the Joker's sequel. Another common mistake I see beginner creators make, thinking that size doesn't matter. But this is just go for creators with a small dip. The reality is over 60% of YouTube users watch on mobile. So those tiny details and cute icons you spend hours on Photoshop, they're not even gonna be noticed. A quick fix for this is to simply make your elements bigger and make them pop out. You'll be surprised how often I've suggested people to increase the size of the key elements in their thumbnails. And just by making this one simple change, they doubled their views. Before we move on to the next section, I have a confession to make. I'm a thief, but not in the way you think. A few months ago, I had to make a thumbnail for a channel and I only had 24 hours. Normally, this wouldn't be a problem, but I had 5 other thumbnails to design on the same day. So I did what any smart thumbnail designer would do. I stole like an artist, of course. I was scrolling through YouTube for inspiration. I came across this thumbnail from a creator in the same niche. I studied the elements that make it stand out and applied those same principles to my client's thumbnails with my own unique touch. The result? My client's video ended up getting over 1 million views. And till today, the same format has generated over 15 million views across multiple videos for the same client. So if a format works well for someone else in your niche, chances are it'll work for you too, because your audience already has shown interest in this format. And on that note, it's perfectly fine to reuse formats that have already worked for you in the past. Some call it being lazy. I call it being smart. A lot of creators try to reinvent the wheel every time, but sometimes it's better to stick with what's proven to work instead of chasing new ideas. Now, if you want to see the most common mistakes most creators and probably you make in your thumbnails, click on this video next.